Rain hammered against the windshield as Marcus Chen adjusted his worn paramedic uniform for the third time that shift. His partner Jake was complaining about overtime again, but Marcus wasn't listening. He was calculating whether his paycheck would cover both groceries and his sister's textbooks this month. The radio crackled to life. Multiple vehicle collision, Highway 101 northbound. CEO of Blackstone Industries involved. Marcus had no idea that responding to this call would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The scene was chaotic when they arrived. A sleek black Tesla had collided with a delivery truck, sending both vehicles spinning across 3 lanes of traffic. Other cars had swerved to avoid the wreckage, creating a domino effect of fender benders stretching nearly a quarter mile. The Tesla's driver door was crumpled inward, trapping whoever was inside. Marcus grabbed his medical bag and sprinted toward the luxury vehicle, while Jake coordinated with the fire department. Through the spider-webbed driver's window, he could see a man in an expensive suit slumped forward, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. The man was conscious but dazed, his designer tie askew and his usually perfect hair disheveled. "Sir, can you hear me? I'm Marcus. I'm a paramedic." "Try not to move your head." Marcus worked quickly, assessing the situation through the narrow gap where the window had partially shattered. The trapped man looked up with piercing blue eyes that seemed oddly alert despite his obvious disorientation. "My phone," he mumbled. "I need to call my assistant." "The board meeting." "The board meeting can wait," Marcus said firmly, pulling on latex gloves. "Right now we need to make sure you don't have any spinal injuries." "What's your name?" "Alexander Blackstone." The name rolled off his tongue with the confidence of someone accustomed to being recognized immediately. Marcus showed no reaction to the name, though he'd certainly heard of Blackstone Industries. Their corporate logo was plastered across half the billboards in the city. Instead, he focused on what mattered. The patient's pupils were responsive. Breathing was steady. But there was definite trauma to the left side of his head. The fire department arrived with their extraction tools, but it would take time to safely remove Alexander from the wreckage. Marcus squeezed through the passenger side window, which had been completely shattered, cutting his uniform sleeve on the jagged glass in the process. "This is going to be uncomfortable, but I need to stabilize your neck," Marcus explained, carefully positioning a cervical collar. His hands were steady despite the cramped conditions and the growing crowd of onlookers filming with their phones. Alexander winced but remained still. "You're good at this," he said quietly, watching Marcus work with practiced efficiency. "It's my job," Marcus replied, checking Alexander's pulse and blood pressure. "How are you feeling? Any numbness in your arms or legs?" "No, just this headache, and I think my left shoulder might be dislocated." Marcus examined the shoulder carefully. "Separated, not dislocated. Painful, but not dangerous. We'll have you out of here soon." While they waited for extraction, Marcus kept Alexander talking to monitor his cognitive function. "What do you remember about the accident?" "The delivery truck ran a red light. I swerved but couldn't avoid it completely. Then everything spun and—" Alexander paused, studying Marcus's face. "You have very calm eyes for someone dealing with this chaos." Marcus felt an unexpected warmth at the comment, but stayed professional. "Panic doesn't help anyone. Besides, you're going to be fine. This looks worse than it is." The extraction took another 20 minutes. Marcus stayed by Alexander's side the entire time, monitoring his vitals and keeping him calm as the firefighters carefully cut away portions of the vehicle. When they finally lifted Alexander onto the stretcher, Marcus noticed how Alexander's eyes followed him, even as they loaded him into the ambulance. During the ride to Memorial Hospital, Alexander remained unusually alert for someone who'd just been in a serious accident. He asked Marcus about his training, how long he'd been a paramedic, whether he enjoyed the work. Marcus answered honestly. He'd been doing this for 5 years, had trained at the community college while working nights at a warehouse, and yes, he found meaning in helping people, even if the pay barely covered his bills. "You live around here?" Alexander asked as Marcus checked his IV line. "About 20 minutes east of downtown, nothing fancy." Marcus wondered why this wealthy executive was making small talk instead of demanding to speak with his lawyers or calling his company. Alexander nodded thoughtfully. "I grew up about an hour from here, a small town called Millbrook. My father was a mechanic." This surprised Marcus. He'd assumed someone like Alexander Blackstone had been born into wealth. What made you leave? Scholarships, work, ambition maybe. Alexander's voice carried a hint of something Marcus couldn't quite identify. Regret? Nostalgia? I haven't been back in years. Quote, they arrived at the hospital, and Marcus helped transfer Alexander to the emergency room staff. As the attending physician took over, Alexander grabbed Marcus's wrist gently. Thank you, he said, his blue eyes intense with sincerity. I mean it. You probably saved my life today. Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. Just doing my job, Mr. Blackstone. Alexander, and I won't forget this. Marcus nodded politely and turned to leave, already thinking about the paperwork he needed to complete and the 3 other calls waiting on his radio. He had no way of knowing that Alexander watched him walk away with an expression of genuine fascination, or that the wealthy CEO was already formulating a plan. 2 hours later, Marcus was back at the station, filling out incident reports and grabbing a stale sandwich from the vending machine for dinner. His supervisor, Dave, walked by and glanced at the paperwork. Blackstone Industries CEO, huh? That's going to be all over the news. Good work keeping him stable. Marcus looked up from his report. He seemed like a decent guy, actually. Not what I expected. Rich people are just like us when they're bleeding, Dave said with a cynical laugh. They forget that pretty quick once they're back in their corner offices. Marcus thought about Alexander's questions during the ambulance ride, the genuine interest in his answers, the way he'd thanked him. Maybe Dave was right, but something about the encounter felt different. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister Emma. How was work? Did you save any lives today? Smile. Marcus smiled and typed back. Just another day. How are the classes going? Good. Professor Chen says I'm improving in organic chemistry. Thanks again for helping with the textbook money. Marcus looked at his bank balance on his phone app. $247 remaining until next payday, rent due in 6 days. But seeing Emma's message made it worth it. She was going to be a doctor someday, something their parents had never been able to afford to dream about. He finished his paperwork and clocked out, driving his 10-year-old Honda through the now clear streets where the accident had occurred earlier. The wreckage had been cleared, traffic was flowing normally, and there was no sign that anything unusual had happened there. Just another emergency call, another patient transported safely to the hospital. Marcus had no idea that across the city, in a private room at Memorial Hospital, Alexander Blackstone was lying awake despite the pain medication, thinking about the calm competence of the paramedic who treated him. He was thinking about Marcus's honest answers about his struggles with money, his dedication to his work despite being underpaid, and something in his eyes that suggested depths worth exploring. Alexander had built an empire by recognizing value where others saw ordinary circumstances, and he was beginning to suspect that Marcus Chen might be the most valuable discovery of his life. 3 days had passed since the accident, and Marcus was deep into another grueling shift when his radio buzzed with an unusual request. Dispatch was asking him to report to the administrative office at Memorial Hospital, something about a patient follow-up inquiry. Marcus frowned as he walked through the hospital's sterile corridors. Patient follow-ups were typically handled by phone or through official channels, not by requesting paramedics to come in person. When he reached the administrative wing, a well-dressed woman in her 50s approached him with a professional smile. Mr. Chen? I'm Patricia Williamson, patient advocate for Memorial Hospital. Thank you for coming in on such short notice. Marcus shook her hand, still puzzled. Is there a problem with one of my recent transports? Quite the opposite, actually. Mr. Alexander Blackstone specifically requested to speak with you about his care during the accident 3 days ago. He's being discharged today and wanted to thank you personally. Before Marcus could protest that this wasn't necessary, Patricia was already leading him toward the elevator. He's in the executive wing, room 412. He insisted it would only take a few minutes of your time. The executive wing was clearly different from the rest of the hospital. Marble floors instead of linoleum, original artwork on the walls, and a general atmosphere of luxury that made Marcus acutely aware of his basic paramedic uniform and scuffed work boots. Room 412 was more like a hotel suite than a hospital room. Alexander was dressed in casual clothes, dark jeans and a navy button-down shirt, and was packing what appeared to be multiple flower arrangements into boxes. Marcus! Alexander's face lit up genuinely when he saw him. I wasn't sure Patricia would be able to reach you. How are you? I'm fine, Mr. Blackstone. How are you feeling? Any lingering effects from the accident? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Alexander, please. And I'm good as new thanks to your quick thinking. He gestured to a comfortable chair. Please sit for a minute. I know you're probably busy. Marcus remained standing, feeling out of place in the luxurious surroundings. I'm glad you're recovering well. Patricia said you wanted to thank me, but that really isn't necessary. I was just doing my job. Alexander studied him for a moment, then walked to a small refrigerator in the corner of the room. Have you eaten today? I ordered way too much food from this Italian place downtown. I grabbed something at the station, Marcus lied, not wanting to admit he'd been surviving on vending machine snacks because his grocery money had gone to Emma's lab fees. Alexander opened a container, and the rich aroma of garlic and herbs filled the room. This is from Romano's. Have you been there? Their chicken parmigiana is incredible. He began plating the food expertly. I may have grown up poor, but I developed an expensive taste in food somewhere along the way. Despite himself, Marcus's stomach growled audibly. Alexander pretended not to notice, but slid the plate toward him anyway. You mentioned you grew up poor, Marcus said, accepting the food gratefully. That's hard to imagine now. Alexander sat across from him with his own plate. 6 of us in a 2-bedroom house. My mom worked 3 jobs. Dad fixed cars when he could find work. I wore the same pair of shoes for 3 years in high school because we couldn't afford new ones. Marcus looked at Alexander's clearly expensive leather shoes, then back at his face. What changed? Full scholarship to State University for engineering. Worked in the computer lab. Lived on ramen noodles and determination. I started my first company junior year. Computer repair service for other students. Sold it senior year for enough money to start the next one. Alexander took a bite of his pasta. But success has a way of insulating you from the real world. I haven't had a genuine conversation with someone in months until our chat in the ambulance. Marcus found himself relaxing despite the unusual circumstances. Running a major corporation must be isolating. More than you'd think. Everyone wants something from you, or they're intimidated by your position. You start to wonder if anyone actually likes you for who you are versus what you can do for them. Alexander paused, seeming to realize how personal he was being. Sorry, I don't usually dump my existential concerns on people I barely know. It's fine, Marcus said, surprised by his own honesty. I imagine money solves some problems but creates others. Exactly. Like, I can afford any restaurant in the city, but I eat most meals alone in my office. I can buy a house anywhere, but I come home to empty rooms every night. I can hire the best personal trainers and nutritionists, but I haven't had time for a real workout in 2 years. Marcus found himself genuinely curious about this man who seemed so different from the typical wealthy executives he occasionally transported. Do you miss it? The simpler life? Alexander considered this carefully. I miss knowing that the people around me genuinely cared about me. My mom used to make me take sandwiches to school because she was worried I wasn't eating enough. Now I have assistants who schedule my meals like business meetings. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Alexander spoke again. Can I ask you something personal? Marcus nodded, though he felt a flutter of uncertainty. The other day you mentioned your sister's textbooks. Are you putting her through school? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. She's working toward pre-med. Our parents died in a car accident when she was 16, so she's my responsibility now. She's incredibly smart, smarter than I ever was, and she deserves the chance I never had. Alexander's expression grew serious. That's remarkable. How do you manage the financial pressure? Lots of overtime shifts. I pick up extra work when I can. Some months are tighter than others, but we make it work. Marcus stood up, suddenly feeling like he'd shared too much. I should probably get back to my shift. Of course. Alexander stood as well, but there was something in his manner that suggested he wasn't ready for the conversation to end. Marcus, I have a proposition for you. Marcus felt his guard go up immediately. What kind of proposition? Nothing inappropriate, Alexander said quickly, reading his expression. I've been thinking since the accident about how disconnected I've become from real life, real people. I'd like to offer you a consulting position. I don't know anything about running a business. That's exactly why I need your perspective. You understand what it's like to work hard for every dollar, to make difficult choices, to care about something beyond profit margins. Blackstone Industries has gotten so focused on quarterly reports that we've lost sight of the human element. Marcus stared at him. You want to pay me to tell you how regular people think? I want to pay you to help me remember what matters. Part-time, flexible around your paramedic schedule. The compensation would be significant. How significant? Alexander wrote a number on a piece of paper and handed it to him. Marcus looked at it twice, certain he'd misread. This is what you'd pay me monthly? That's the quarterly amount. Monthly would be higher. Marcus sat back down heavily. The quarterly amount was more than he made in an entire year as a paramedic. This is crazy. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you stayed calm under pressure when my life was at stake. I know you put your sister's education ahead of your own comfort. I know you're genuine in a way that's become rare in my world. Alexander sat down across from him again. Think about it. You could secure Emma's future. Maybe even go back to school yourself if you wanted. Marcus's mind raced with possibilities. Emma's medical school tuition paid in full, no more choosing between groceries and textbooks, maybe even the chance to pursue the engineering degree he'd abandoned years ago. Why me? He asked quietly. Alexander smiled. Because 3 days ago you treated me like a person who needed help, not like a business opportunity. You have no idea how refreshing that was. Marcus looked at the paper again, then folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. I need time to think about this. Of course. Take all the time you need. Alexander handed him a business card. My personal number is on the back. Call me when you've decided. As Marcus walked back through the hospital corridors, his head spinning with the unexpected turn his life had just taken, he had no idea that Alexander was already planning their next meeting with the careful strategy of a man who'd built an empire but had just discovered something he valued more than money. Marcus spent the next week avoiding Alexander's business card like it might explode. Every time he looked at it sitting on his kitchen counter next to unpaid bills, he felt a mixture of hope and skepticism that made his chest tight. The number Alexander had written down could solve every financial problem he'd ever had. But something about the situation felt too good to be true. Emma noticed his distraction immediately when she came home from her organic chemistry lab on Thursday evening. She found him staring at the card while eating cereal for dinner again. Okay, what's going on? She asked, dropping her backpack and studying his face with the analytical precision of a future doctor. You've been weird all week. Marcus sighed and told her everything. The accident, the hospital meeting, Alexander's unexpected offer. Emma listened without interruption, her dark eyes growing wider with each detail. Let me get this straight, she said when he finished. A billionaire CEO wants to pay you more money than we've ever seen, to basically be his friend and give him life advice. That's the part that sounds insane when you say it out loud. Emma picked up the business card and examined it like a piece of evidence. Marcus, what if this is legitimate? What if he really just wants genuine human connection and is willing to pay for it because he doesn't know how to find it otherwise? Rich people don't work that way, Em. There's always an angle. Maybe, she said thoughtfully, but you said he grew up poor like us. Maybe he remembers what it was like to be genuine, and now he's surrounded by people who only care about his money. Maybe he sees something in you that reminds him of who he used to be. Marcus hadn't considered this perspective. You think I should call him? I think you should meet with him again. Ask more questions, feel him out. Emma grinned. Besides, worst case scenario, you get a free expensive dinner out of it. The next morning, Marcus finally dialed Alexander's personal number. Alexander answered on the second ring, as if he'd been waiting. Marcus, I was hoping you'd call. Have you given my offer some thought? I have questions, Marcus said directly. Good. Questions are smart. Are you free Saturday evening? I'd like to take you somewhere that might help explain what I'm really looking for. Saturday night found Marcus in Alexander's Tesla, fully repaired since the accident, driving through parts of the city he'd never seen. They weren't heading toward the expensive restaurant district, as Marcus had expected. Instead, Alexander navigated toward an older neighborhood, where small houses sat close together and children played in yards under streetlights. Where are we going? Marcus asked. Millbrook Community Center. I sponsor a mentorship program there. Kids from low-income families get tutoring and career guidance. Alexander parked in front of a modest brick building buzzing with activity. I started coming here about 6 months ago, trying to reconnect with something real. Inside, the community center was alive with energy. Teenagers worked on homework at roundtables, while volunteers helped with math problems and essay writing. Alexander was immediately greeted by several kids who clearly knew him well. "Mr. B, did you bring the guy who saved your life?" A girl about 16 with braces and fierce determination in her eyes approached them. "Jasmine, this is Marcus." "Marcus, meet Jasmine Rodriguez. She's going to be a nurse practitioner someday." Jasmine shook Marcus's hand with surprising firmness. "Mr. B told us all about the accident. He said you were super calm and professional. That's exactly how I want to be when I'm treating patients." Marcus found himself drawn into conversations with several of the kids. They were hungry for stories about his work, fascinated by the medical aspects of emergency response, and refreshingly direct in their questions. He spent an hour describing different types of emergencies he'd handled, the training required to become a paramedic, and the satisfaction of helping people during their worst moments. Alexander watched from across the room, occasionally joining the conversation but mostly observing Marcus's natural ability to connect with the teenagers. When it was time to leave, several of the kids asked if Marcus would come back sometime. In the car afterward, Alexander was quiet for several blocks before speaking. 6 months ago, I was completely isolated. I had everything money could buy, but no one to share it with who wasn't on my payroll. Then I started volunteering here, and those kids reminded me what genuine enthusiasm looks like, what it feels like to care about something beyond profit margins. Marcus nodded, understanding beginning to dawn. "But you still feel like an outsider there." "Exactly. They appreciate my donations and my time, but there's a gap between us that money created. They see me as the rich guy who helps out, not as someone they can really relate to." Alexander glanced at him. "But tonight, watching you with them, I saw something I haven't seen in years. You connect with them instantly because you understand their world. You've lived their struggles." "So you want me to be your translator," Marcus said, not unkindly. "I want you to help me remember how to be human, how to care about things that matter, how to use my resources in ways that actually make a difference instead of just making me feel better about having so much." Alexander pulled into the parking lot of a small diner. "Can we grab coffee? I want to tell you the real reason I'm making this offer." Inside the diner, a place that clearly belonged to Marcus's world more than Alexander's, they sat across from each other in a red vinyl booth, while a waitress named Dolores poured coffee and called them both honey. "The truth is," Alexander began, stirring sugar into his coffee, "I've been thinking about that accident every day since it happened. Not because of the physical trauma, but because of those 20 minutes in the ambulance when someone treated me like a person instead of a business opportunity." Marcus sipped his coffee and waited. "I've built something incredible with Blackstone Industries, but I've lost myself in the process. I make decisions that affect thousands of employees, but I haven't had a real conversation with any of them in years. I donate millions to charity, but I don't know if it actually helps people or just makes me feel less guilty about my wealth. And you think I can fix that?" Alexander leaned forward intently. "I think you can help me find my way back to caring about the right things. You understand what matters because you live it every day. You sacrifice for your sister's future. You work overtime to help people in their worst moments. You find meaning in service instead of profit." Marcus considered this carefully. What would this job actually involve? Come to board meetings and tell me when we're being out of touch. Visit company locations with me and help me see them through the eyes of our workers. Help me redesign our charity initiatives so they actually address real problems instead of just looking good in press releases. Alexander paused. "And maybe just be someone I can talk to honestly, the way we talked in the ambulance." Marcus felt something shift in his understanding of the situation. This wasn't about Alexander buying a friend. It was about a man who'd achieved everything society said he should want and discovered it wasn't enough. "There's something else," Alexander said quietly. "I know this might sound presumptuous, but I felt something during that accident, something I haven't felt in years. A connection with someone that had nothing to do with business or money or status." Marcus's heart began beating faster. "Alexander, I'm not just offering you a job, Marcus. I'm hoping maybe you'd be interested in getting to know me as more than just a patient you treated. I know we come from different worlds now, but we started in the same place. Maybe we could find some middle ground." Marcus looked across the table at this man who commanded boardrooms and made decisions worth millions, sitting in a diner booth and nervously stirring his coffee while admitting he was lonely. The vulnerability in Alexander's expression was completely genuine. "I'd like that," Marcus said simply. Alexander's smile was radiant. "Really?" "Really, but I have conditions. I keep my paramedic job, at least part-time. I won't be dependent on you financially, and I won't lose who I am just because you have money." "Of course. I wouldn't want you to change. The person you are right now is exactly who I'm hoping to get to know better." 6 months later, Marcus was reviewing quarterly reports in Alexander's downtown office while Alexander sat on the floor helping Emma study for her MCAT. The three of them had become an unlikely family of sorts, with Alexander insisting on paying Emma's medical school tuition and Marcus splitting his time between emergency calls and corporate consulting. The transformation in both men had been remarkable to witness. Alexander's executive assistant, Patricia Williamson, the same woman who'd arranged their first hospital meeting, often commented on how her boss had changed. Gone were the terse, profit-focused directives. Instead, Alexander now asked questions about employee morale, workplace safety, and community impact before making major decisions. Marcus's influence had rippled throughout Blackstone Industries in ways neither of them had anticipated. When Marcus suggested they survey employees about their actual needs rather than assuming what benefits to offer, they discovered that flexible scheduling mattered more than expensive holiday parties. When he recommended Alexander visit the company's warehouse locations unannounced, they found safety violations that had gone unreported for months because workers feared retaliation. "You realize you've revolutionized how we operate," Alexander had told him just last week as they reviewed employee satisfaction scores that had jumped 30% in 6 months. Marcus laughed. "I just asked you to listen to people who actually do the work." But the corporate consulting was only part of their evolving relationship. Alexander had started joining Marcus on some of his paramedic shifts, not as a participant, but as an observer who wanted to understand the world that had shaped the man he was falling in love with. He'd seen Marcus calm panicked parents during their child's asthma attack, comfort elderly patients who were scared and alone, and work tirelessly through 12-hour shifts without complaint. "How do you do it?" Alexander had asked one night after a particularly difficult call involving a fatal car accident. "How do you see tragedy every day and still maintain hope?" Marcus had considered the question carefully. "Because for every tragedy, there are 10 times when we make a difference. When someone gets to go home to their family because we were there. When a scared kid stops crying because we made them feel safe. The good moments outweigh the hard ones, but you have to let yourself feel both." Alexander had nodded, understanding that this philosophy extended far beyond emergency medical work. It was how Marcus approached everything, acknowledging difficulty without letting it eclipse possibility. Their romantic relationship had developed slowly, carefully, with both men mindful of the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. Their first official date had been at the same diner where Alexander had revealed his true intentions. Dolores the waitress had winked knowingly when they sat in the same booth, holding hands across the red vinyl table. Emma had been their biggest cheerleader from the beginning. "You two are perfect for each other," she declared after watching Alexander attempt to teach Marcus chess while Marcus tried to explain emergency medical protocols to Alexander. "You both get so passionate about helping people, just in different ways." The integration of their different worlds hadn't always been smooth. Alexander's friends and business associates initially struggled to understand his relationship with a paramedic. Marcus sometimes felt overwhelmed at corporate events where conversations revolved around stock prices and market trends. But they'd learned to navigate these challenges together, with Alexander proudly introducing Marcus as the person who keeps me grounded, and Marcus finding ways to contribute meaningfully to discussions about business ethics and social responsibility. The community center in Millbrook had become a regular part of their weekly routine. Alexander and Marcus co-facilitated a career exploration program for teenagers, with Alexander sharing insights about entrepreneurship and Marcus discussing healthcare careers. The kids had embraced their unusual partnership, often joking about Mr. B and his boyfriend, the hero paramedic. Jasmine Rodriguez, the aspiring nurse practitioner who'd first met Marcus, had become particularly close to both men. When she'd been accepted to the State University's nursing program with a full scholarship, partially funded by a Blackstone Industries education initiative that Marcus had helped design, she'd hugged them both with tears in her eyes. "You guys showed me that success doesn't have to mean forgetting where you came from," she'd said. "Mr. B could have just written checks, but he wanted to actually understand our lives. And Marcus, you proved that being smart and caring can take you anywhere. Emma's MCAT results had exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. She'd scored in the 95th percentile, virtually guaranteeing her acceptance to top medical schools. The celebration dinner at Romano's, the Italian restaurant where Alexander had first shared his hospital meal with Marcus, had been filled with laughter, tears, and plans for Emma's bright future. "I can't believe how much our lives have changed," Emma had said, raising her glass of sparkling cider. "A year ago, Marcus was stressed about my textbook money. Now I'm deciding between Harvard and Johns Hopkins for medical school." Alexander had squeezed Marcus's hand under the table. The best changes happen when you least expect them. As autumn arrived, Marcus found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. He was reviewing employee feedback surveys in Alexander's home office, a converted bedroom in the penthouse apartment that Alexander had never used for anything but storage until Marcus started spending nights there. The luxury still felt surreal sometimes, but it was the quiet moments like these that felt most natural, working side by side, occasionally sharing thoughts or insights, comfortable in each other's presence. Alexander appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee and that soft smile that had become Marcus's favorite sight in the world. "How are the surveys looking?" Alexander asked, settling into the chair beside Marcus. "Really positive. The warehouse workers especially appreciate the new safety protocols. And the child care assistance program is being used more than we projected." "Your idea," Alexander reminded him, pressing a gentle kiss to Marcus's temple. "Our implementation," Marcus corrected. "I couldn't have made any of this happen without your resources and influence." Alexander set down his coffee and turned to face Marcus fully. "I have something I want to ask you." Something in his tone made Marcus's heart rate increase. "What is it?" Alexander pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and Marcus felt his breath catch. "I know we haven't been together very long in the traditional sense, but I also know that some connections transcend timelines. You saved my life in more ways than one, Marcus Chen. You brought me back to myself, taught me how to care about things that matter, and showed me what genuine love feels like." Marcus stared at the ring box, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. "I'm not asking you to quit being a paramedic or change anything about who you are," Alexander continued, his voice steady despite the obvious nervousness in his eyes. "I'm asking if you'd be willing to build a life with me where we both get to be exactly who we are, just together." Marcus looked at this man who had started as a patient, became a friend, evolved into a lover, and was now offering to be a partner in every sense of the word. The accident that had brought them together felt like a lifetime ago, but the connection they'd discovered in those 20 minutes in the ambulance had only grown stronger with time. "Yes," Marcus said simply, and Alexander's smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto Marcus's finger. The accident that had brought them together was just the beginning of a story none of them could have imagined. A story about finding family where you least expect it, about the courage to be vulnerable with someone new, and about discovering that the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought, only built through trust, time, and genuine care. As they held each other in the fading afternoon light streaming through the penthouse windows, both men understood that they had found something infinitely more precious than wealth or success. They had found home in each other, and a future that neither could have dreamed alone. The engagement news spread through their interconnected circles with surprising warmth. Emma burst into tears of joy when they called her at the university library, causing a minor disruption that she didn't care about in the slightest. "I'm going to be the best man," she declared immediately, or maid of honor, or whatever you call it when your brother marries the love of his life. The kids at the Millbrook Community Center threw an impromptu celebration party the following week, complete with a homemade banner that read, "Congratulations, Mr. B and Marcus," in multicolored markers. Jasmine had organized the whole thing, recruiting younger kids to make paper flowers and convince the kitchen volunteers to bake a cake. "You guys are like proof that fairy tales can happen to real people," she told them as they cut the slightly lopsided but heartfelt cake. "Except better, because fairy tales are boring compared to your story." Alexander's business world had taken longer to warm to the relationship, but Marcus's influence on company culture had gradually won over even the most skeptical board members. When Alexander announced their engagement during a quarterly meeting, the applause was genuine rather than polite. Marcus had attended enough of these meetings by now to recognize the difference. Your fiancé has saved us more money in employee turnover costs than our previous 5 efficiency consultants combined, board member Janet Martinez told Alexander after the meeting. Plus, our public image has never been better. People trust a CEO who listens to paramedics over one who only listens to other millionaires. The wedding planning process revealed new dimensions of both their personalities. Alexander, who could negotiate million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, became surprisingly anxious about flower arrangements and seating charts. Marcus, who remained calm during medical emergencies, found himself overwhelmed by the sheer number of decisions required for what was supposed to be, quote, a simple ceremony. They compromised on everything. A small wedding at the community center instead of a fancy hotel ballroom, with catering from Romano's rather than an expensive event company. Emma would indeed serve as Marcus's best woman, while Alexander's college roommate, David, would stand beside him, the one friend from his past who had known him before the money and success. 3 weeks before the wedding, Marcus received an unexpected call during his paramedic shift. A massive multi-car pileup on the interstate required all available units, and Marcus found himself working alongside teams from 3 different hospitals to manage the casualties. It was the kind of large-scale emergency that tested every skill he developed over the years. Hours later, exhausted and still processing the intensity of the day, Marcus returned home to find Alexander waiting with dinner and a hot bath drawn. No questions about the delay, no complaints about missed plans, just quiet understanding and care. "How many people did you help today?" Alexander asked as Marcus finally relaxed in the warm water. 7 direct transports, probably a dozen more who were treated on scene. 2 critical cases that will make full recoveries because we got them to surgery fast enough. Marcus leaned his head back against the tub. Days like this remind me why I can't give up field work entirely, even with the consulting job. Alexander knelt beside the bathtub, running gentle fingers through Marcus's damp hair. I would never ask you to give it up. The man I fell in love with is someone who runs toward emergencies, not away from them. That part of you isn't negotiable. It was moments like these that solidified Marcus's certainty about their future together. Alexander didn't want to change him or possess him. He wanted to support the person Marcus already was while growing alongside him. The night before their wedding, they stayed apart according to tradition, with Marcus at their shared apartment and Alexander at his penthouse. Emma had insisted on the separation, claiming it would make the ceremony more meaningful. Marcus lay awake, thinking about the impossible journey that had brought him to this point. From counting coins for groceries to planning a future with someone who valued him exactly as he was. His phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "Tomorrow I get to marry my hero. Thank you for saving my life in every way that matters." Marcus smiled in the darkness and typed back, "Thank you for showing me what love looks like when someone sees all of you and chooses to stay." Quote, the wedding day dawned clear and bright, with autumn leaves creating a golden backdrop around the community center. As Marcus stood at the altar watching Alexander walk down the aisle, they decided to both make an entrance rather than one waiting for the other. He thought about the randomness of the accident that had started everything. A split second of timing, a truck running a red light, a Tesla swerving at just the right moment to bring 2 people together who had been living parallel lives without knowing it. When they exchanged vows they'd written themselves, Alexander's voice was steady as he promised to never stop seeing Marcus as the person who had treated him with dignity when he was vulnerable, who had challenged him to become better without trying to change who he fundamentally was. Marcus's vows focused on gratitude for the accident that had brought them together, for Alexander's courage in pursuing something real despite the risk, and for the unexpected family they'd created with Emma and the community center kids who had become such an important part of their lives. As they kissed to seal their marriage, surrounded by cheering friends and family in a community center decorated with paper flowers and fairy lights, both men knew they had found something that couldn't be measured in dollars or status. They had found a partnership that made them both better versions of themselves, and a love story that proved the most valuable rescues happen when you save each other. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.